So once again, good morning, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to be here with you practicing in this way this morning. And also, today is an anniversary of sorts, and I want to thank our dear Sangha member and a dear friend, Karen, who sent me a little card this week reminding me of this anniversary. This is the 3 years ago on this October Sunday is when I became director of Temple Buddhist Center. So can you believe it's been 3 years? And this is my 16th year with Temple Buddhist Center. I started back in 2004 as a student, wandering into walls and people and things like that. And so it's truly been an amazing journey, and I look forward to sharing this path with all of you all for another 16 years or even more, who knows. So the talk this morning is entitled Note to Self. And so, you know, as I prepare a note to self, dear self, what were you thinking? And I literally mean that. What were you thinking? This idea of noting or labeling our present moment experience was really brought forward into the Western consciousness by Mahasi Sayadaw, a very famous teacher. In his method, he included noting, is what he called it. Pema Chodron calls it labeling. Many, many teachers have written and talked about this technique. And paradoxically, this idea of noting or labeling is actually meant to take the meditator beyond thinking. However, it is not an end in itself. And so it has come up and it's been very alive for me the past few weeks. You know, times of great crisis have a way of bringing us back to the basics. Times of crisis have a way of bringing us back to those techniques and practices that are foundational to our practice as Buddhist practitioners and meditators, mindfulness. And so that is one of the gifts in the difficult times. So I really want to unpack today this technique that is used by almost all practitioners of noting or labeling. So let's talk a little bit about this. It basically comes, as the Buddha wrote, in two stages. This process of concentration comes in two stages. The first is noting or labeling, and the second is acknowledgement. So the first part of this, the noting or the naming of the object, this simple noting or naming whereby your attention is pointed at or focused on the object. And this is known in the Buddhist practice as vitakka. And so it is basically just a word that encapsulates the whole experience. So for example, a child is very obvious and simplistic as they are growing and when they're young. And so for example, a 2, 3, or 4-year-old begins to speak, they rejoice at being able to know the name of something. House, house, house. And this is an amazing experience. But isn't it funny that for us, the term house comes with all this baggage and worry and concern and bills and repairs and you know, difficult experiences. So it's so much more than house. It's just a word. It's just a sound. And in this way, you often hear so many of the great teachers talk about Zen mind, beginner's mind, house. Or to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must come as a child. House. So this idea of allowing a word to encapsulate the whole experience is a very deep and profound practice. And the first step of it is what we're talking about right now. That's this noting or labeling. And so the purpose of doing this is to basically shrink thought down to a single word. And this is the preliminary effort. As I said before, Pema Chodron she'll use the practice and she'll actually use the word thinking. So in our meditation practice, or even as we are in a mindfulness practice throughout the day, something arises and she'll just label it, thinking, thinking. Nicoya Helm, one of our beloved teachers here at Temple Buddhist Center, taught us not long ago about Shinzen Young, another very, very famous teacher, who used this same process of noting, but gave it a different twist. He called it see, feel, hear. So as you are in a mindfulness practice going about your day, when you see something and the awareness is brought to that, you label it, seeing. If the awareness is brought to the sound, maybe the dog barking behind you, hearing. If you notice an emotion or a sensation or a feeling arise, you simply label it, feeling. What this does is it creates spaciousness around the experience. All of a sudden, you're not embroiled in worrying. You've labeled it, worrying. When we do that, we're no longer caught up in the experience. We are aware of the experience. Do you see the subtle difference? This is now an opportunity to simply create some space around it. It becomes much larger. You pull the camera back. Now, for this process to be effective, noting has to be done with precise effort. There has to be an acknowledgement of what the body, heart, mind are actually doing. For instance, when one wakes from a fantasy, you suddenly realize that you've been daydreaming. There is first the noting, arguing, planning, craving after something. And then the second consequent noting, we call this acknowledgement. This is a realization and an acknowledgement of what is obsessing the mind. So let me give you my real life example and why this has been coming up for me so much recently. I even became aware of myself employing this technique when I wasn't even employing it deliberately. I just suddenly realized that when the mind would become overrun with thoughts, and then all of a sudden, just because of our practice, it would label it. So in this case, for me, it was fighting. So as the mind would obsess over perceived or possible conflicts with coworkers, bosses, family members, political friends, Facebook, things like that, it would run these videos and there would be this thinking and there would be all of this confrontational, well, if they say this, I'll say that, or if he does this, I'll do that, all of this. And at the moment of realization, I would take a deep breath, fighting. And so there's that first step, noting. And as I said, it's very important because you see, this is only the first step. This is not the end of it. If I stopped right there, it'd be like going fishing and you notice that the float starts jiggling up and down. Well, there's a much deeper thing happening here, which is you have a fish, there's a root here, something that's causing the jiggling. But if you just notice the jiggling, you could notice that all day long and nothing happens. In some cases, some people might call this spiritual bypassing, where, oh, look at me, I'm employing noting. I'm employing a spiritual technique of labeling. I have seen it fighting. And if you just left it at that, then there's no growth, there's no transformation. The true growth and transformation comes from that open door right there. Fighting. I then follow that down. What is the resistance here? Fighting requires an obstacle. It requires something to push against. So I notice, there's resistance. There's an obstacle. A villain has been created. Follow that down, or as my teacher would say, go deeper. Well, what's going on? Where do you feel this fighting, this resistance? I notice it, the epicenter is in my belly, it's in my tummy. Go deeper. I become aware of this inability to control, this resistance, this fighting, this planning is about a fear of not being in control, a fear of perhaps not being right or losing. Go deeper. I become aware of this moment in time right now where my mother is transitioning from an independent lifestyle to a nursing home. She's not happy about it, and she's fighting with me. And so what this is all really about is this fear of the conflict that is happening right now with my own mother in this transitional stage that she's in. However, that fear of this fighting brings about what? More fighting. It just manifests everywhere. This is the beauty of the process. The universe is madly in love with us and is on our side and wants us to wake up. So what does it do? It provides that for us. It is an abundant universe. And the moment we think that, oh, God, it's sending me all the wrong things, no, it's sending you exactly what you need to wake up. And so when I see this fighting with bosses, coworkers, friends, I realize that all of that is just a simple manifestation of the fear of conflict, of the fear of disappointing those I love. This is the work. This is growth. This is transformation. This is what we talk about all the time when we talk about the path of purification. When you go deep like that, you are purifying fear, greed, hatred, and delusion. And when you purify those, you come to realize your true nature, who you really are. Love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So although there is this careful noting, worrying, fighting, whatever you want to give it, feeling, hearing, seeing, the attention is never placed on the word itself. It is placed on the experience as a whole. And in this way, the intellectual faculty is brought into service of the intuitive intelligence, rather than the other way around, rather than intuitive intelligence being fogged up by conceptual thinking, ideas, concepts, trying to figure your way out of it. This attention, as it grows in strength, will eventually take all the energy out of thinking to the point to where there is just the noting word, fighting. And then I'm able to breathe into and create spaciousness around the whole experience and get to the true reality. What's really going on here? In the Buddhist practice, there's the old saying that we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. This is part of our practice, is to learn to see the truth of the moment, the truth of the reality. You see, thinking is always about something. It is an attempt to categorize. What we experience, however, is seen in the light of past experience. What we have experienced in the past is filtered through the way we look at things, our disposition, in other words. That is why thought will not allow us to see things anew. If we want to experience things as they really are, then thought about those things must come to an end and truly experience the moment as it is and stop thinking about the moment as it is. When thinking stops, we must be right there and present in what is happening. And it is at this point that true insight, that vipassana occurs. Our practice is distracted by thoughts, by plans, by unfinished emotional business, by conflicts, physical tension, by restlessness, memories, instincts, drives, urges. But when we can become present with those things and allow them to rise and fall and simply note it, follow it in deeper, and then purify that, that's what waking up means. Waking up from the dream of thought. Waking up is being present with the pain and not needing to get away from it through busyness, through thinking. Waking up is being present with the pleasure and not clinging and grasping and trying to hold on to it. It's the open hand, allowing life to simply unfold in each and every moment. And so this idea of karma is brought into play because no word, action, deed, or thought happens without an intention. And that's what this clarity, this practice of noting, acknowledging, feeling, and then purifying, what arises for us is the clarity of what our intention was. Was it your intention to just feel better? Or was your intention to wake up, to go deeper? If you're caught up in all the thoughts, then there's just a struggling and a striving to feel better, to avoid, to not have to feel the pain. But when you follow it in, as in the true path of the spiritual warrior, let's go into it. Let's see what's really happening. Then the intention is to wake up. These actions, when repeated, create our habits. And all of our habits create our personality. And our personality is what is driving us to our destiny. And this is how we create our reality. It is in these bodies that we fall asleep, and it is in these bodies that we wake up. So I'd like to close with this little poem by Emily Dickinson. The brain is wider than the sky, for put them side by side, the one the other will contain with ease, and you beside. The brain is deeper than the sea, for hold them blue to blue, the one the other will absorb, as sponges and buckets do. The brain is just the weight of God. For lift them pound for pound, and they will differ, if they do, as syllable from sound.